Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Revolution Recap. The Revolution season came to an end Saturday in the first round of the playoffs in Atlanta. The Revs' defense held firm for the majority of the match, but Franco Escobar's 70th minute goal put the host on top, and the boys in blue were unable to find an equalizer. With the loss, the roller coaster of the 2019 Revs season has come to a close. We're here to talk about the failure in Atlanta and we're to the 2020 offseason. I'm Greg Johnstone. Joining me today is Sean Donahue. Sean, how's it going?
You know, I am really enjoying the new single elimination playoff format. Disappointing, the local team is no longer part of it, but so far I would say the new playoff format looks like a success.
You know, I will say too that originally I wasn't sure if this was a advantage for the Revs. That's kind of how, is it better that we're only playing Atlanta once, or would I want to have two legs and have, one leg at home? And honestly, I think having one game, there is so much more excitement. You can really catch a superior team on a bad day and knock them out of the playoffs. I just think it makes a lot more drama, and everyone's watching. Whereas I think in the past, what team might be advancing in the first round if a superior team gets a result on the road and then they bring it home. You know how it's going to end up. So I have a little bit of mixed emotions with the playoff format. I really am going to be annoyed with the midweek matches because I really won't get to see a whole lot of that. And I get why they did it, where they want it not to conflict with football and all that, but the single elimination, I think it's catching on with me as well. So and obviously the Revs almost pulled off the upset in Atlanta. I can't say that they deserved to win because I certainly think Atlanta played pretty well, and the Revs really didn't muster a whole lot of offense up. So I would call it a bit of a fair result, but certainly a better performance than the 3-1 loss in Atlanta we saw 2 weeks ago. Sean, what was your key takeaway from yesterday's game, the 1-0 loss in Atlanta?
Yeah, to be honest, I thought it was a fairly even game where both sides perhaps could have scored more than they did. There was that Joseph Martinez breakaway that Matt Turner denied. That was, fantastic goalkeeping that you expect, Joseph Martinez to put away 9 times out of 10, or not, if not 10 times out of 10. So that was huge there. But, the Revolution had a few chances of their own that they should have done better with. There was that Teal Bunbury chance where the ball came over the top and he was open behind the defense and he headed it right at the goalkeeper. I think that chance is probably harder than people would give him credit for, with the ball coming in at that angle to try to get power on it on frame. But at the same time, if he was a more confident striker, perhaps he would have let the ball drop and volleyed it instead of trying to take the header and really put himself in a position where it wasn't going to be too easy to get enough power on there. And then there was the Juan Caicedo chance where he stretched out to try to deflect a good cross in and didn't get to it. And, I thought he probably should have been better on that. And there was, Juan Agudelo had a decent chance off a corner kick where he headed it over the bar. So my takeaway kind of goes to that. And, it's not new, but it's just this game really reiterated the fact that the Revolution could really use a clinical finisher at number 9. And I'm not, kind of Gustavo Bo as a number 9 here. I think he's more of a withdrawn kind of roaming forward. But, this game to me really showed that the Revolution could do a lot better if they had a guy up there that you could count on to put away those type of chances. Because that really on all 3 of those chances, or at least 2 of them, you look back and think of a guy like Taylor Twellman and you think he puts those in the back of the net, and, maybe the Revolution then take this game into overtime. And who knows what happens instead of the Revolution losing this game 1-0. Because, and Juan Agudelo, Juan Fernando Caicedo, and Teal Bunbury, I think you have the Revolution's 3 options at number 9. And all 3 of them, I thought had chances in this game that they should have done better with. And, that's really why the Revolution at the end of the day lost this game, was they couldn't finish those chances. So, we talked about all the positions the Revolution need to address in the offseason. That was the one that I thought kind of cost them this game more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think, I think the thing that'll kind of haunt me, and I don't know if a lot of people will look back on this as a very memorable moment, but that ball Diego Fagundes swings in for Juan Fernando Caicedo was a beautiful ball. And the fact that Caicedo, who, we've talked all season long, that his really one skill is he's able to finish chances. And the fact that he flat out whiffed and kind of went with an awkward right foot instead of a left foot to put that one home. I mean, he just seemed all sorts of tangled up and like he didn't know where it was or so I don't want to harp on him too much, but, you bring in this guy as a TAM signing, and that just kind of is the I mean, just the epitome of the Juan Fernando Caicedo era, where he was this hyped up signing, and you finally give him a spot where he can come through in the clutch, and he really just underperformed on every single level. So, and probably his last action as a member of the Revolution, I'll say, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But
I think that's a safe assumption.
We'll get to that later, but that's an extremely safe assumption. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think a striker too changes the whole outlook of the game because, one thing you look back on the second half of the season, the games where the Revolution have struggled to get the ball to Bo, get Bo chances. Those are the games where they get shut out or they find the goal once. You look at Carles Gil and Gustavo Bo. That was kind of my take, that Atlanta was able to find a way to shut them down, and that really was it for the Revolution. They didn't really have many chances beyond that. Gustavo Bo had 3 shots, all of which were outside of the box. He was 9 for 19 passing in the attacking third, dispossessed 4 times. Carles Gil did not have a shot this game. He did have 81% pass accuracy, but he was 14 for 21 in the attacking third. Usually does a little bit better. That's still not a terrible stat, but dispossessed 3 times, and he didn't seem to really have a whole lot of influence on the game. And that's your central playmaker. That's the guy you want to have the ball. That's your team MVP. So Atlanta did a really good job of quieting them down and limiting the star players. And the Revs had to rely on Teal Bunbury and Juan Fernando Caicedo and Christian Pinilla. And the goals just weren't there today from the supporting cast. So I think if the Revs can bring in a third piece that can really transform this offense and finish those chances and be reliable and give Carles Gil and Gustavo Bo a little bit more room to work with and play with those 2 star players really well, I think that's going to be a really dynamic offense. It's going to be tough to shut down like Atlanta did yesterday.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. You mentioned Gustavo Bo and the impact that he can have on the Revolution's offense. I do think that was another thing that was a big factor for the Revs. And you kind of talk about the need for Teal Bunbury to kind of take over that game because of Gustavo Bo and Carles Gil kind of having quieter performances by their standards. And then you look back to that 37th minute chance where I believe it was Teal Bunbury and Gustavo Bo who had a 2-on-1 break with Michael Parkhurst. And Parkhurst, probably knowing that Gustavo Bo was the much more threatening player, edged towards Gustavo Bo. But Teal Bunbury, instead of kind of taking it on himself and going forward, still passed to Gustavo Bo. And Bo ended up being covered well by Parkhurst, who's, as you know, a very strong defender in this league, playing what might be, unfortunately, his last game. But he marked Bo very well, and after Bunbury played that pass, the chance wasn't nearly as dangerous because Bo was marked out and he had to play it back to Christian Pinilla, who admittedly put a very strong shot on frame, but that chance should have been a lot more dangerous. And I think if Bunbury had a bit more confidence, he would have dribbled it forward further himself and forced Parkhurst to either come off of Bo or take on the shot himself if Parkhurst kept giving him that much space. So that play kind of summed it up for me. What was wrong with the Revolution offense in this game was still a reliance on a guy like Gustavo Bo, who clearly is a much classier finisher than a Teal Bunbury. But in a situation like that, you need your number 9 to take on the initiative and sprint forward and have the confidence to take that shot himself rather than pass to the guy that's a little bit better covered.
Still a great play by Parkhurst, though. I think that it was really well read.
Oh, absolutely.
And for a team that's missing Miles Robinson, a potential defender of the year, for him to, I believe he was a finalist for defender of the year. They're missing him and stepping in. I know he's not as skilled as Robinson, but still has his wit, still a savvy veteran, and still did the job yesterday. They really didn't need Robinson, as exhibited by the donut on the board for the Revolution. So he did a really good job filling in, and that play I think was his shining moment. Might be his last career highlight, unfortunately, obviously with him going out because of injury. But Sean, while we're talking about Atlanta's back line, let's kind of switch over to the Revs back line, which I wanted to talk about because I thought they did a pretty good job yesterday. I thought Andrew Farrell had a very solid game overall. I know he had that non-foul in the box. That was a bit of a tricky moment where I think it was Barco went down in the box. That looked like a very awkward play, but I don't think he got away with a PK. I think it was the right no call, but certainly NYC FC flashes came back where Farrell has a really solid game and then commits a penalty in the box. I thought it was going to be one of those games, but no call on this one. I thought the referee did a good job with that. So Farrell, I think it's passing marks for me. I also thought Brandon Bai and Antonio De La Mea did a really solid job. Dwan Jones had a bit of a quiet night at left back, but other than the goal that got behind him, which really wasn't totally his fault, I thought he did a pretty admirable job for a rookie left back who was playing at Michigan State last year. Sean, give me your assessment of the back line.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that too much. With Andrew Farrell, I think there were, two plays that kind of stood out as negatives. The one you mentioned, and there was another play where I believe it was Joseph Martinez was one-on-one with him, and he kind of failed to win the ball, and that led to a great chance for Joseph Martinez, but Matt Turner bailed him out. But overall, I thought, minus those two plays, I thought Farrell played really well in this game and used his athleticism to help out the back line. De La Mea, I thought, had a good game as well. I don't think he was quite as involved as Farrell was, but he did have at least one really key block. And his passing overall, I think it was 95% passing accuracy, so certainly didn't hurt the team. Brandon Bai, I thought defensively had one of his better performances for the Revs. With that said, there were one or two times where he got beat down the wing for pace by Vlaba and others, and Farrell was there to bail him out a couple times. But he had a couple of good tackles in this game, and defensively I thought he did really well overall by his standards.
Can I cut in?
Jones?
Can I cut in with some stats on Brandon Bai before you move on to Dewan Jones? I just want to throw this out here. He had 9 ball recoveries. He was 5 for 6 on tackles, 1 interception, 1 block. He was 2 for 2 in clearances, and also 2 for 2 in headed clearances, which I believe is a different category altogether. Oh no, it's the same thing. Either way, 2 for 2 on clearances, both of them headed. So Brandon Bai overall had a very solid defensive game, as you said. But sorry, continue on with Dewan Jones.
And Dewan Jones, I agree, he did have a fairly quiet game, other than the one goal, the goal that was given up. That I think you can certainly put some blame on him for that, for not tracking that run a bit better. And he also had 2 shots, both of which were kind of weakly on frame or easily saved. But it's hard not to look at some of the low lights offensively from the fullbacks. And with Dewan Jones, there was one that stood out to me, which was right off the kickoff after Atlanta had taken the lead. The Revolution tried to press forward, and Jones just took a touch right out of bounds pretty quickly off the kickoff. And then Brandon Bai, the Revolution kept going down the right wing late in the game when they were piling numbers into the box, and consistently Brandon Bai's crossing was terrible at that point. So for all the good things he did defensively, which is kind of unusual because his game has been more about the offensive side for the Revs. I thought offensively in this game, when the Revolution were trying to get an equalizer, he was really a weak link for the Revs with that crossing, as the Revolution finally had numbers forward, and he just couldn't get any loft on his crosses and consistently were drilling it into the defender, whether or not he had space. So that, to me, was a pretty big negative from Brandon Bai. The Revolution actually attempted 21 crosses in this game, 5 of which were successful. A third of those crosses, 7 of them, were from Brandon Bai, of which he was successful on one of those. And that one that he was successful on was basically a cross from the corner flag that ended up with a Revolution player near midfield. So I'm not really sure about your definition of a successful cross. But that to me was a big negative from Brandon Bai that took away from the fact that he had a really good performance defensively.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I will say Brandon Bai has really improved defensively over, I'd say, the last couple of years, considering he was a winger coming out of Western Michigan, which isn't even really a power school. Now, I'm trying to think of how to word this. He has certain traits that I think are valuable. I do think he's a pretty solid defensive player, but the role that he's in right now, where he pushes up and he's crossing the ball, the crosses don't seem to work. And as you said earlier, it's almost by design that he's to get up and cross the ball deep. I wonder, with the signing of Alexander Butner, who allegedly is going to be the Revolution's left back next season, I wonder if Brandon Bai stays home a little bit more and kind of plays back a little bit more, because he's pretty good at the in the air. He have improved, and there's no reason to believe they won't improve further. I think if he wasn't as fast and he was a little bit more built out, he might be a center back. I know that kind of seems crazy to say, but I think a lot of his speed and his mobility makes it look like he's a right back, but his inability to cross is really apparent. And I'm not totally sure if he's built to be a right back. He might be that Andrew Farrell type of right back where he just doesn't contribute a whole lot offensively. And I'm curious to see if they continue to go forward with Brandon Bai at right back, and how his role kind of shifts if he does stay in that right back position.
Yeah, the difficult part there with Brandon Bai is it seems like with Carles Heel on the right flank, Bruce Arena, kind of as you were alluding to, wants Brandon Baye to be that guy that just pushes forward and provides the width for the Revolution, because Carles Heel obviously cuts inside a lot from that right flank, and I think he does really well with that. And Brandon Baye does a decent job combining with Carles Heel when that combination means Brandon Baye is passing to Carles Heel and Carles Heel is creating the offense. When that combination means Brandon Baye is getting down the right flank and having to deliver a cross, that's where it really falls apart. And Brandon Baye is capable of putting in a low-driven cross. We've certainly seen that, but he's not capable of putting in a lofted cross. And when you're kind of one-dimensional and you're crossing like that, it becomes a lot easier to defend. And we certainly saw Atlanta do a very good job of defending that with his crosses. I don't think a single one of his driven crosses was very threatening in this game. But you're right. When Brandon Baye is actually asked to play more defensively, and for spells in this game he was, he looked pretty good, which certainly has not always been the case. But, so many times this year, the Revolution have kind of pinched inside, and we saw that when Giuliani Baba was playing, where it was, almost more of a back three, and Brandon Baye was kind of playing as a wing back in a formation that didn't require wing backs, and wasn't really asked to get back defensively so much. That's where I just don't think he provides enough to justify playing him in that role. So if the long-term plan is to keep Carles Heel kind of as that right midfielder that's going to be playing more of a kind of an inside forward on the right side, and expecting a fullback to overlap, I don't think Brandon Baye is good enough at that role unless somebody can teach him to improve on his lofted crosses. And as it's been, albeit with Bruce Arena, it hasn't been that long, but with the Revolution now, it's been a couple of years, and we haven't really seen any improvement in that end of his game. And I think at this level, that's just too one-dimensional for the Revolution. So, maybe you're right, and they end up playing him more defensively, but it seems like if the intent is to have Carles Heel play the role he's playing, the Revolution or Bruce Arena, really wants him to contribute offensively by providing that width and sending in crosses. And you just can't be effective providing that width if you can't send in a lofted cross.
Swinging over to, I agree with all that, and I want to kind of shift to Juwan Jones, who you kind of touched on. A lot of speculation going into who would be starting this game at left back. Giuliani Baba finished the season at that left back role, but obviously there were some issues containing Julian Gressel down that right flank with Annie Baba out there. Not exactly the fleetest of foot. Edgar Castillo was back in training. It was reported he might be available for this game. They ended up going with the rookie Juwan Jones, who has been filling a lot at left back. He made the start. Did pretty well as we've talked about. Sean, do you think that was the right move going with Juwan Jones? What was your thoughts at kickoff, and did your assessment change at all now that you've seen the game and get to play captain hindsight?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly wasn't sure what was the best route for the Revolution to go at left back going into this game, because, like you said, Annie Baba wasn't very good in their last game against Atlanta. Going into that game, I would have said for sure that Annie Baba, based on him starting the previous game and his defensive ability, would have been the guy to start this playoff game, but I think that was brought into question with the game 2 weeks ago. And then, of course, Edgar Castillo coming out of injury, you didn't know, what you're going to get from him, and he's been a question mark defensively. So, to be honest, I wasn't sure what was the right answer here. I was a little bit surprised to see it be Juwan Jones, given, that role had kind of gone to Annie Baba or Castillo when they were healthy. It seemed more likely than not under Bruce Arena. But, Juwan Jones defensively did a really good job and used his pace to good effect against Atlanta. So I think it turned out to be the right move. But before the game, it was hard for me to say that was the best option that the Revolution had, especially if Castillo was 100%. I know Castillo gets a lot of flack from Revolution fans, but you think going into a big game like this, that the experience of a guy like Castillo that's played for the national team, that's played in playoffs in Mexico, that's been all over the place, that maybe you rely on his experience over the youth and speed of Juwan Jones. But at the end of the day, I think it turned out to be the right decision.
Yeah, and I will say the reason I kind of framed it, now that we've known, I think seeing that game, I think that was the correct decision. I think Annie Baba got burned so badly. I think that has a lot to do with why Juwan Jones got that start. But yeah, I thought Juwan Jones did pretty well for the most part. I can't really blame him for a whole lot. I going into this game, the left back spot was a major concern for me, and I really had hoped Giuliani Baba was going to work out at left back in that season finale. But I think Bruce Arena saw that the writing was on the wall. Going into this game, I was very skeptical about Juwan Jones there, but as I say, did pretty well, and I think in the end that was the best option available. But boy, it's such a weak spot for the Revs, and hopefully Alexander Butner is able to kind of lock down that left back spot, which has been an issue for the Revolution for so long. So there was one other big big change in the Revolution lineup. Scott Caldwell, as you mentioned, not exactly the Revs' favorite player over Luis Caicedo. We do have two questions about Luis Caicedo. Revolution Report on Twitter asked us why no Caicedo in this game, and Mike Kennedy asked us would Zahibo and Caicedo have been a better midfield duo. So Sean, what is your assessment about the choice of picking Scott Caldwell, and why do you think they did it?
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously the biggest surprise in this lineup was to see Scott Caldwell out there. I think there was certainly justification for the unknown at left back, but Luis Caicedo, we've talked a lot in this podcast that he can be, one of the most valuable players to the Revolution when he's on top of his game. Now, with that said, I don't think he had the best game against Atlanta 2 weeks ago, so I think that probably weighed into this decision as well. But Scott Caldwell under Bruce Arena has seen very, very limited minutes for the Revolution. He seemed to be unfavored by Bruce Arena, and it really seemed like Bruce Arena didn't rate him very well. So to see Scott Caldwell inserted in this game, given that, and given how few minutes he'd played under Bruce Arena, was pretty shocking. And he ended up going the full 90 minutes, and you almost wonder if he was even fit to go the full 90 minutes given the lack of playing time under Bruce Arena. Now I know I rate Scott Caldwell more than I think some of the Revolution fan base does, and I thought he was okay. There were a few moments where he got the ball in difficult circumstances and turned it over that led to dangerous chances for Atlanta. I do think he's a guy that you can perhaps count on to be, a bit more positionally aware and help organize the midfield more than perhaps Luis Caicedo. And I think, he did a decent job there. I don't know if Luis Caicedo going into the midfield makes the Revolution win this game. But at the same time, this move really shocks me because I do think Luis Caicedo is one of the key players for the Revolution when they're successful, and the ground that he covers and what he provides to that midfield and the bite he provides and just his ability to get box to box. It was pretty shocking to me that he didn't play this game, and as much as I think Scott Caldwell can help this team, given that the combination the Revolution have relied upon under Bruce Arena so much was Zahibo and Caicedo, I'm surprised Caicedo didn't play, and I think, Bruce Arena, unless there was some injury to Caicedo we didn't hear about, that, Bruce Arena might have overthought this one a little bit, because, Caicedo is a guy that just provides something that nobody else in the Revolution does with his ability to cover ground.
Yeah, I don't get it. And we defend Scott Caldwell. I know a lot of people aren't big fans of his. I think he's a useful player all the way around. I am by no means a Scott Caldwell hater. I am very confused about this switch. I'm very confused why he went 90 minutes and he didn't come out in the second half. I guess they thought Caldwell was a bit more of an offensive player than Zahibo, and so they put Fagundes on for Zahibo. But Luis Caicedo really has not been contributing at all offensively in the weeks leading up this game. So maybe that has something to do with that Caldwell is I guess a bit better of a passer, is a bit better, I guess, offensively and in transition. I don't get it, though. I think Luis Caicedo was the person starting this game. Going over Caldwell's stats, and all stats, by the way, by Stat Zone, 27 for 33 passing. He was 8 for 11 in the attacking third and 4 ball recoveries, so decent stats overall, but he was 1 for 4 in tackles. He had that awful turnover in the first half, which almost led to a goal. According to Who Scored, he had 45 touches, which is the least among Revs players who went 90 minutes. He had a Who Scored rating of 6.22, which is the worst among starters, except for Wilfred Zahibo, who also did not have a great game, who had a Who Scored rating of 6.21. That central pairing of Zahibo and Caldwell, both of them had a bit of a down game, but I think obviously with Caldwell's surprise inclusion into this lineup, I think that makes this a little bit more visible. I will say, too, he did a little bit better as the game went on. I think his first half was very, very choppy. I'm not totally sure why that is. Towards the second half, he seemed to be a little bit more subtle and played, I guess, fine. But I don't understand. I can't get my head around why Luis Caicedo was not in this starting lineup, unless it was an injury, like you said. It might be another Jalil Anibaba situation where, we saw this game play out 2 weeks ago. Caicedo didn't play astonishing. Anibaba didn't play astonishing, so they tried DeJuan Jones and they tried Scott Caldwell. But outside of that, I'm very confused at this selection.
Well, and you mentioned Scott Caldwell not having, starting the game kind of slowly and having some errors in the first half. You couldn't even blame him if he was a bit rusty, given the lack of minutes he's had under Bruce Arena. And he really hasn't played that much since Bruce Arena took over, which to me is what really makes it shocking that he, played this game and went 90 minutes. If the contest between Caicedo and Caldwell was close enough where, one kind of off game for Caicedo was going to be enough for Caldwell to play, I don't know why Caldwell didn't get more minutes.
Yeah, I mean, he did have that good game in Portland, where
the short
it was that 4-3-3 game. That was a weird game, and they still pulled out a draw barely out of that game. So I don't know. Caldwell did play good in that game, but as you said, he didn't really have a ton of minutes. So I don't get it. It was very, very surprising.
Well, yeah, I'm just looking at his game log, and go back to August 24th. He didn't play in that game. He didn't play on the 31st. He didn't play on September 7th. He played 16 minutes on September 14th, then 0 minutes on the 21st. Then he had that 90-minute game against Portland, which was the midweek game, so there was some rotation in that. And they played 1 minute the next game, and then 0 minutes in the final regular season game against Atlanta. So down the stretch, he had 6 out of 8 games where he played 1 minute or less. So if he was rusty to start this game, and then you go back before that, he had 3 straight games where he didn't play either, sandwiching a 45-minute appearance. But if you go down and look at that, there's no surprise if he was a little bit rusty in this game. Yeah. Certainly.
I'm very confused. I was confused at the time of the selection. I was confused after the game, and I'm confused now. And I'm not doubting Scott Caldwell's ability as a player. I just it was very surprising to me. So.
No, because I was confused why he didn't play more minutes down the stretch, especially in games where the Revolution were trying to hold on to lead.
Atlanta, but you don't trust him, at any point in the second half of the regular season. I don't want to say I feel like there's more here, but I feel like I'm missing something. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. And I know Luis Caicedo is more of a defensive player. That's fine, but it's not like. The 2018 season, he was getting up and he was a little bit more involved in the offense, and he can pass the ball. It's not like he's, if anything, I'm surprised Zahibo didn't sit for Caldwell, because Zahibo is kind of a bigger body. He's a little bit slower. He's kind of that anchor in the defensive midfield. So, I could see maybe you're going to go with 2 kind of smaller, quicker defensive midfielders, but I don't know. I don't get it. Anyway.
Well, and you mentioned that too, because Atlanta's not really a team that kills you with their height either. So it would have made some sense if it was Caldwell in for Zahibo. I could have kind of seen the justification there, because Joseph Martinez is 5'6", Ezekiel Barco's 5'7", Merrim's got some height to him, but generally the offense of Atlanta isn't someone that you're worried is going to go up and win those diving headers, and you really need that that tall presence back there to win the aerial duels. That's not usually how you decide a game against Atlanta.
Bruce Arena has 5 more MLS Cups than you and me combined, so I'm sure there's a very good reason. I just don't know what it is. So I don't know. I want to throw out one more stat. Scott Caldwell, he had a really rough first half, as we mentioned. He had 13 touches in the first half, so he was completely invisible when he wasn't screwing up in the first half. He really had no influence, and as I say, got a little bit better as the game went on. Ended the game with 45 touches, so he had 32 touches in the second half. Was a little bit more involved and was a little bit more solid as the game went on. And I will say too, I think when they went down 1-0, I'd rather have Scott Caldwell out there than Luis Caicedo. But I don't know. That was a very, very strange selection. Sean, let's move into some listener questions here. Muhammad Hussein asked us, if we had a better striker instead of Teal/Caicedo too, do we win this game? That kind of goes along with your key takeaway. Do you think if we had a striker, they take this game in Atlanta?
I mean, I think they have a much better chance of it. It's hard for me to say that for sure, because I go back to that chance that Atlanta had with Joseph Martinez, who, arguably the best striker in the league, and he didn't finish off that breakaway. So anything can happen in a big moment. But, do I think the Revolution would have a much better chance in this game with a better striker? Absolutely. I go back to those, 3 chances, one from each of the Revolution's, options at striker, that were all blown. And again, I can't help but think one of those gets put away if the Revolution have a better option up there. So, do they win this game? I don't know. Does it go to overtime? Probably.
Yeah, I certainly think it's a little bit closer of a game, and they're certainly going to get more than, I think, 6 shots on target. They're certainly getting more chances in the box. So I don't know if they win this game, but I certainly think they would have had a little more chances. And it felt like when Atlanta scored, in my mind, I kind of felt like, well, that's it. they've done a good job of shutting down this defense. I wasn't totally sure if they were going to be able to break through that Atlanta United defense, and they really didn't. So if they had another striker, it could have helped. But as I say, I'm not sure. Atlanta is a very solid team, and going into that stadium and beating them is a very tall task. Along the same line, Powder Hungry asks us, do the Revs need a new forward, someone who can score when they get a perfectly weighted ball behind the back line? Might be a little bit of a dig there at Teal, but as you mentioned, Sean, I think we're in agreement the Revs could use a new forward.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's got to be one of the offseason priorities.
Little Wolf on Discord. This question confused me a little bit. I've talked to him a little bit, so I don't think he'll mind me kind of crapping on this question. But he asked, how much did Atlanta pay the refs? I actually thought the refereeing was fine yesterday. I thought they did pretty well. And I will say that they didn't buy into any of Atlanta United's ridiculous diving, started passing out some yellow cards on the spot. The Joseph Martinez, Matt Turner kind of collision at the end of the first half is the one that sticks out in my mind, where Joseph Martinez goes down and a yellow card is immediately issued. And it was so quick, I kind of assumed it was on Matt Turner, but the referee was just not giving into any of Atlanta's diving. So I had no issue with the refereeing. He kind of clarified that he felt that the Revs were not given some fouls either, but I think in the playoffs you got to have that let the boys play mentality. So I have no issues with the refs.
No, I'm with you. And there were honestly a couple of challenges from Revolution players that I thought were worthy of yellow cards that he let go. So I think there was one from Pania, perhaps. I'm trying to remember it, but one or two that stood out to me as ones that I thought were going to be yellow cards, and they weren't. So I don't really think the Revolution can have much fault on the referees for the loss in this one.
Goat Caicedo asks us, what position do we need the help at the most? It was the attack that struggled today rather than the defense. Sean, if you can upgrade what position this offseason, what are you choosing?
Yeah, I've had this question a lot over the podcast this season, and my answer's changed a few times, and I think it's going to change again. And I'm going to go with that number 9 rule. And that's, recognizing that the Revolution have already apparently upgraded the left back spot. With that said, for me, it's a very, very, very close battle between that number 9 rule and finding a truly dominant central midfielder to pair with Luis Caicedo long term. I don't think Wilfred Zahibo, who has admittedly improved a lot under Bruce Arena, I don't think he is the long-term answer for the Revolution. I think that's a spot that the Revolution are capable of upgrading, and a spot that could have a lot of influence. So I'm going to say number 9, but if it's going to be kind of a 1A and a 1B, with 1B being the central midfield.
I do have one more question about the Atlanta United game, because we're going to move on to the 2020 offseason in just a few minutes. A lot of people asking about who's staying, who's going now that the season is concluded. But Mike Kennedy asked us, in a 2-legged playoff, could the Revs have beaten Atlanta with another crack at them, minus Michael Parkhurst at home? So, Sean, imagine a second leg that's going to be happening next weekend. Atlanta United coming to Fortress Foxborough. Do you give the Revs a puncher's chance?
I'd still favor Atlanta in that situation. Atlanta just did such a good job of shutting down the Revolution offense. If Brandon Bai could learn how to cross in the air between now and then maybe I'd give the Revolution a better shot. But you got to finish your chances, and the Revolution didn't finish their chances in this one. And I'm not sure if those same players were given those chances again, they'd finish them. And, I do think that Atlanta's a team that's also capable of making adjustments, and they could have put together a better game plan than they did in this one. With that said, if Michael Parkhurst is out and Miles Robinson is still not back, that does look a lot better for the Revolution's opportunities to be down, 2 of your best central defenders, and maybe things turn around. But if Miles Robinson's back to step in for Parkhurst, then Atlanta's still going to win the series.
Yeah, I think the Revs certainly had a decent chance of it. I think going into that Atlanta game, I think it's first off, the game would play out a little bit differently if Atlanta knows they have to go on the road and go into Foxborough and play a second leg. I guess in theory, if there's 2 legs, the Revs would play the first game at Foxborough. It'd probably be a very defensive battle. It'd probably be a 0-0 game, and then go to Atlanta, and Atlanta would probably have a similar result to what they found today. With that being said, if we were going to go to Foxborough this week, I'd give them a chance. As you said, missing Parkhurst, I think that's a really big loss. We talked about earlier that play in the first half that Parkhurst kind of shut down. If you're not going to have Miles Robinson, having a veteran in there like Michael Parkhurst, who has done and seen it all, even though he's in his aging years, I think that's extremely valuable. So Atlanta going to their 4th center back along that back line. I think Gustavo Bo and Carlesio would find a way to break that. I think someone would get a really not easy chance, but a chance they should finish, and they probably would. So I'd expect the Revs to at least get on the board in that game. Yeah, I mean, I could totally see it being a 2-1 thing and going to extra time or something like that. I think it would still be very, very close, and being down a goal isn't great for the Revs. But yeah, could they have taken this in a two-leg scenario? Absolutely. I don't see that being a. I definitely see the Revs having a decent chance if they were able to get one more crack at Atlanta at home.
The only other thing I'll say is Atlanta is just such a tough matchup for the Revolution, and the Revolution don't have that home field advantage caused by the turf that they have against so many other teams, because Atlanta also plays on similar or the same turf. So looking at Atlanta, I think they're a team that the Revolution don't have that good of a home field advantage against either. But I'm probably overthinking this one at this point since that's no longer.
I think a lot of it too
scenario.
is like, I mean, do away goals count more? Because if the Revs don't have an away goal, Atlanta probably would get one. So then the Revs have to win 3-1. Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on a lot of hypotheticals. But if row goals don't matter more, I think the Revs have a chance. But if row goals matter more, if Atlanta has the second leg, those are all things that I think favor Atlanta a little bit more. Atlanta's a tough matchup. I mean, and the Revs are better than a 7 seed, but Atlanta is a 2 seed. Atlanta is just really good. So,
yeah, I mean, I would favor the Revolution. Well, I wouldn't favor the Revolution, but matchup-wise, New York City FC, even though they're above Atlanta in the standings, I think is a much better matchup for the Revolution. And Philadelphia, as good as they are, I think is a better matchup for the Revolution. It's just, this is, just regardless of standing and seeding, this to me, Atlanta is just a really tough matchup for the Revolution, and has been under multiple coaches now. So. Until the Revolution prove otherwise, it's hard for me, even with a good performance like this one, it's hard for me to say that, another game would be enough for the Revolution to turn it around.
Okay, so let's move on to the 2020 off season, and we have a lot of questions here. I'm going to run through them real quick, but Cambo on Discord says, who should be gone and who should we get to fill these voids? Heel is Dad says, name 5 players we must keep and 5 players we should probably let go. Randy LH on Twitter says, other than Turner, Heel, and Bo, who are your must-stay, must-go players? And then Revolution Report asks us kind of in the same vein, does Juan Agudelo stay? So Sean, I'm going to take a crack at we'll do a 5 needs to stay, 5 would like to see go. And I've got some contract details here that might be a little long-winded, but I'll give you my 5 and 5. And we'll go from there. The 5 that need to stay, Heel and Bo, Turner, obviously are all going to be staying, and they're all under contract, so I can't see them going anywhere. I would say Luis Caicedo, we've got to stay. I know that we have to strengthen the midfield, as you said, Sean, but his salary is at $300,000. He was purchased last year. He's still very young. I think Luis Caicedo is still a player you can kind of build off of, and Wilfred Zahibo too. I'm not totally sure what his contract scenario is. He was signed before the 2018 season. He had a guaranteed contract last year. He's got over $500,000 in salary. He's at $513,000 in salary, $583 in compensation. So if his 2-year contract is over and he's still demanding that salary, I'm not entirely sure if he is returning with the Revolution, even though he was a Bruce Arena favorite. It seemed I'm not entirely sure if he's under contract for another year or if he might go back overseas. So if Zahibo leaves, I think Luis Caicedo is certainly a player that you're going to need to hold out, because after that you are stuck with Scott Caldwell, Isaac Anking, maybe Haribo if you bring him back. So anyway, moving on from that, I would also say Andrew Farrell, whose contract situation is also kind of up in the air. He re-signed between the 2017 and 2018 season when his contract expired. Again, not entirely sure what his contract situation is. He had an option last year, so it's possible he might have an option this year. Even if his contract is out, he won't be a free agent, I think, until 2021 or 2020. So the Revs have some negotiating power there, but Andrew Farrell, I think, for all that he did, is certainly worth bringing back. For the 5 that I will want to move on from, Michael Mancien is gone. First player gone. Not only is it, so his 2 guaranteed years are up, but according to a Julian Cardillo report from last year, his contract, which was signed in 2018, was for the 2018 and 2019 seasons guaranteed, and he has team options for 2020 and 2021 at $1 million salary. So Michael Mancien, I can guarantee, is not going to be on the Revolution next season. I think Edgar Castillo is gone now that we have Alexander Butner. I'm not entirely sure what his contract situation is, because essentially he was on loan with the option for purchase when he was loaned from a Mexican side to Colorado. Colorado exercised that option and traded him to the Revolution. So in theory, he got a new contract last year. Maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's multiple years. I'm not entirely sure the situation, but being 32, 33, and obviously with Butner coming in, I don't see much of a role for Castillo next year. Juan Agudelo, again, not entirely sure what his contract situation is. Re-signed last year at $575,000 in salary, $605 in compensation. Sean, I don't want to say mocked this signing at the time, but we didn't understand it at the time, and I still don't really understand where he fits in this team. Not sure if his contract is guaranteed or if there are options, but it was a multi-year contract, if I remember correctly. So it's possible Juan Agudelo is under guaranteed contract for this year. If he isn't, I don't think he fits on this team, and they need to move on. And I really think Juan Agudelo should probably move on because he probably would fit in with a team better somewhere else. It just doesn't seem like it's going to work for him in New England. Cody Cropper, I think, is gone. He seems to be pretty set as the third keeper. We've talked before. Brad Knight and Matt Turner signing extensions with the Revs. I think Cody Cropper is the odd man out. Still only making $78,000. So it's not going to really be a hard hitting. It's not a numbers issue, but I just think he probably wants to move on with his career, and I can't imagine the Revs really value a third keeper that's going to be playing for the Revolution too much. I think they might want to develop a younger keeper at this point. And then I will also say I think Zach Haribo, his time is up with the Revolution. I know he's not making a whole lot either. He's on the supplemental roster, but I don't ever see him cracking the lineup, and he's taking up a spot on the 30. I think maybe they decline his contract option, or they just let his contract expire and he re-signs with Revolution 2. And then I'm going to add one more. I'm going to say Diego Fagundes. He has an option here, so they'll definitely pick up the option, but I think it's time to trade him and move on because, as we all know from the saga last year, I don't think Diego Fagundes wants to be here. And right now he's filling in as a super sub. So I think Mancien, Castillo, Harivu, Cropper, Agudelo, and Diego Fagundes are my 6 that we need to move on from. Assuming we have the ability to do that, I think Juan Agudelo might stay here. Carlos Gil, Gustavo Bo, Matt Turner, Luis Caicedo, and Andrew Farrell are the top 5 priorities. Sean, do you have any disagreements, or do you want to change any of those?
So your 5 to keep, I honestly can't disagree on, and I would struggle to kind of replace any of those guys with somebody else. Maybe if I was really stretching, I'd throw Christian Pania in there, but I think that's a stretch over
should
those
be noted.
anyways.
Should be noted too that Christian Pania was purchased last year. He was a loan and then purchased at the end of last offseason. So even though he's a high number,
I think he'll be back.
Oh, you mean
I
to
just
cut?
wouldn't put him in the 5. No, I think he'll be back next year. I just wouldn't put him in my top 5.
Yes.
But
I'm
be
saying he
number
might
6.
have a guaranteed contract anyway. So
yeah,
similar to Caicedo.
But as far as your ones to cut, you can obviously go down to the low salaried guys, and I don't think it's worth that exercise. Whether or not a guy like Brian Wright plays on Revolution 2 next year, or is playing in the championship, the USL Championship instead. I don't think that's really worth arguing about. But I would actually add Zahibo to the list of the 5 guys that I think the Revolution should move on from. I just don't think unless he's taking a huge salary cut, I don't think at his salary he provides enough for the Revolution. And I think that's a position, if you're having a TAM guy who's an international, you want to get more out of, and that's such an influential role for the team. And as good as Zahibo has been comparatively under Bruce Arena as he was under Brad Friedel, I still don't think he justifies the salary and international roster spot given the position he's in. So that would be, given the salary, one of the 5 guys I would say the Revolution should try to move on.
Yeah, one-time All-Star, Wilfred Zahibo, you're moving on from. I mean, for an All-Star defensive midfielder, I mean.
Oh, did you have Juan Caicedo on your list?
So I actually was going to mention him because I wrote down Castillo, but I meant to also write down Juan Fernando Caicedo, which
I think that's a guarantee gone because he's on loan. So I would say there is 0.0 chance that the Revolution pay a transfer fee to bring Juan Caicedo in on a full-time basis, given his level of performance this year and given he's 30 or going to be 30 next year. So that to me is a guarantee gone But those are the two names I would add to the list that you already included, because otherwise I agree with that list that you've included. You'd hope guys like Agudelo or Fagundes, if the Revolution move on from that, those are guys that they can try to get something for. With that said, as we discussed before, I think Agudelo in particular, with his salary, it might actually be hard to get something for him given his lack of production over the past few years. But yeah, there's a good 5 or 6 guys that are highly paid on the Revolution that I think the Revolution could be getting more from those positions, and more for that money that I think the Revolution should look to move on from.
Yeah, and one more thought about Caicedo too. I really don't even consider this a decision. I kind of thought about this as the 5 players you have to decide on. I don't think Juan Fernando Caicedo is even a decision. You're going to be returning him back to his Colombian side and not exercising that purchase option, because as you say, I mean, even if it was a free transfer, the $500,000 in salary does not justify it. So thank you Caicedo too for the memories. John, do you know how many goals he ended up with this season?
What didn't you set it at over under 5 and he ended up at 5?
Yeah,
is that what happened?
I think I remember, and I remember being mocked by you and Seth, so that's just kind of interesting. But anyway, thank you Caicedo too for that'll be a running joke forever. That was really his gift to the team, that I could just make that recurring joke of that one over under. I don't remember any of the other questions or over unders I asked you, but that one will always be fresh in my mind. A couple other people, too, that I just think it's worth noting their contract situation, because I spent way too much time doing this while I was watching football today. Teal Bunbury, I'm not sure what his contract situation is. Teal Bunbury was out of contract, I believe, in the 2017-2018 offseason, along with Andrew Farrell and Brad Knighton. And Brad Knighton signed a contract extension this year, which makes me believe that his contract was winding down. Now he's older than Bunbury and Farrell, but I think the fact that we haven't heard a whole lot about Andrew Farrell and Teal Bunbury's kind of contract status is something to be noteworthy. Farrell and Bunbury also had options last year, so it's totally possible that they just have options for next year as well. I imagine if there is an option around the same salary that Teal had this season, which was $226 in salary, $271 in compensation, I think it'll be extended, and he'll kind of be a bench player. Hopefully they bring in a new forward, as we've talked about. But I think Bunbury's contract is one to kind of keep an eye on. Antonio De La Mea is another guy we haven't mentioned. His salary and compensation is at $425,000. I think the back line might need some work, and that's also a pretty high number too for a guy that's in and out of the lineup and in the 18. So he's been here 2 years. It's unknown how long his contract was for, but if it was a 2-year contract, his deal is up too, and we're not really sure what's going to happen. And then Brian Wright, I know you specifically mentioned Brian Wright as someone you didn't want to really argue about, Sean, but I believe he's still under contract. This was his 3rd year since being drafted. Normally those rookie deals have 4 years, but it is noteworthy that the Revs actually turned down his option after his rookie season and re-signed him. So I'm not entirely sure how many years he has left. I imagine if he has one more year, he will be either with Revolution 2 or Birmingham Legion. But I just wanted to kind of note those guys as I was kind of doing some research, because I think those players also they're not in the top 5 or bottom 5, but they're things to note and things to look out for in this offseason. And actually, one more thing I want to say, just because I know a lot of people on Twitter say they want to get rid of Scott Caldwell. Scott Caldwell has a guaranteed contract for next year, according to Julian Cardillo. At the time of his signing, he has a 2-year contract. I believe he has an option year after that. Hang on one second. Yes, so the contract he signed reportedly was guaranteed 2 years following the season. So Caldwell will be a Rev in 2020 and 2021, and there is a team option for 2022. So sorry to all the people that cannot stand Scott Caldwell, but he will be in a Revolution jersey next year.
And if his salary doesn't go up much from this year, I don't think it's a bad thing to have him on the roster as a rotational piece. Just like with Teal Bunbury, with his salary, I think we would both agree that he shouldn't be the Revolution's everyday starting number 9, but he offers enough to the team where he's not a bad depth piece to have. And if he's playing a lot of minutes as a rotational guy or a fill-in guy on the wing or at striker when somebody's hurt, I don't think that's a bad place to be. And the only other thing I'll add to what you said is, as De La Mea's case, in which I think works in his favor a lot, is the fact that De La Mea has a green card, so he doesn't count as an international player, which to me makes it so the Revolution, even if they're overspending a little bit on his salary, there's more justification for keeping him around than say a Wilfred Zahibo, unless Zahibo ends up getting a green card between now and next season.
Yep. Very good point. I think we've mentioned everyone on the senior roster other than Jaleel Anibaba, which I don't know. Maybe he's coming back. Maybe he had an option last year, so maybe he has an option this year. So just to be thorough, that's everyone's contract status. Sorry
He's
if
cheap
it's long-winded for
Anibaba.
those of you that do not give a crap about this side of it, but a lot of interesting contract decisions to be made. A lot of money coming off the books, and then a lot of players that are kind of in limbo, and we don't really know if they have option years or not. But it's going to be some interesting decisions if they do.
Yeah, and Andy Baba is just a good cheap depth piece. So whether the Revolution keep him or not, he's getting older. I don't think it's the end of the world if they lose him. He's 31 now. But if he re-signs for another 100K next year to be a depth piece, that's good too. So I think that's the reason we didn't mention him. Is he's one of those guys where if the Revolution keep him, great. If they don't keep him, he's a guy they should be able to replace with perhaps somebody younger that can be a depth piece across the back line. Either way, you hope he's not a regular starter next season.
We did have another question too from Revolution Report, looking forward to next season and the USL side. The Revolution are starting. Anyone you would like to see for Revolution 2 next year? I think the homegrowns and the guys on the bottom end of the roster and the supplemental and the reserve roster, Isaac Anking, Tayon Buchanan, Nicholas Firmino, I think will get some minutes there. I don't know where DeJuan Jones will stand with this team, if he has a spot next year, or if he's going to be around. But pretty much anyone out of the 18, I imagine, is going to be getting some minutes at Revs too. So Justin Rennicks, DeJuan Jones, Firmino, those guys I think we're going to see a little bit too. And if they do get some reinforcements in the midfield, I could see Scott Caldwell maybe going down and captaining that team on weeks where he's not needed in the 18. And then whoever the third keeper is, maybe it's Cody Cropper, but I imagine they'll draft someone to kind of take over that role. So, the kids I imagine will go down. I don't know if anyone on the senior roster will go down other than a Scott Caldwell. Outside of that, I don't. And Brian Wright, as we mentioned earlier, outside of that, I don't know if anyone else is going to be on the Revs too. Whoever they draft, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go through this too much, but the young kids, I'll say.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with some of the guys that are the fringe players that aren't so young anymore. And I said I didn't want to talk about whether Brian Wright was going to be back in the main Revs team, but what's going to happen with the Revolution 2 team, because Brian Wright has proven that he's capable of playing at the USL Championship level. So is he going to want to be playing now at the USL League One level, taking a step down to play for Revolution 2, unless the Revolution have some promises that maybe in the future he'll make it to the first team. So that's kind of going to be interesting to see when you see guys that are a bit older. But otherwise, yeah, it'll be good to see guys like Tajon Buchanan get a lot more minutes. Firmino and King. If Haravu gets another season, I assume he'll get a lot of time down there. And then the first team guys, if Scott Caldwell continues to be a rotation guy, it'll be an opportunity for him to stay fresh and stay fit. And again, might have been good for him this season if he had gotten some USL minutes, if he was going to be starting that playoff game to make sure he was fit. But other than that, I'm excited to see some of the academy guys get minutes for that team. At the same time, if you've seen some of the academy results lately, and again, seeing academy results doesn't necessarily mean there are individual players that are ready to come up. But if you look at some of the recent academy results, they're not too exciting or too promising. So hopefully there's some individual good players, despite the fact that the team hasn't been doing very well in the developmental academy tournaments.
Heel is Dad on Discord also asks us, what's our favorite moment from this season? And I'll let you think about that one too. We have another easy question here that I'll throw out. He also asks, on a scale of 1 to 10, how insufferable are Atlanta fans? Although I personally think that we should be rating this on a scale between 28 and 3. But Sean, what are your thoughts on how insufferable Atlanta United fans are?
I mean, I think anytime a team comes into the league, and I think people saw it with Seattle too, and does so well both on the field and in the stands, and their fans are going to show a level of entitlement when they've only been in the league a couple of years. Fan bases that have been in the league forever and have dealt with teams that have had their struggles, like the Revolution, are going to find those fans very insufferable. So I completely get that. But at the same time, I think if Revolution fans were in the Atlanta United shoes and had a team that came into the league by storm and was dominating and selling out every game, they'd probably show the same level of arrogance. So I get the frustration, but I also think the way Atlanta fans act is understandable.
Yeah, and we had I tweeted out a couple things about Joseph Martinez diving, and Atlanta, making jokes at their expense, and I didn't use their hashtag or anything else, but some people found the tweets. I think they just search Atlanta United Joseph Martinez, and kind of defend their players. They were not very happy with two tweets that I sent out. So yeah, they're
I honestly find FC Cincinnati fans more insufferable, but that's just my experience on Twitter.
yeah, but you kind of feel. I mean, you got to feel bad for FC Cincinnati. Oh,
I
goodness.
just I would feel bad for them, except for the fact that several people in the media and myself included tweeted out early on in the year that the roster construction wasn't good enough for MLS. And the fact that their ownership had said they were going to add a couple DPs before the season started and then walked it back and said they weren't, was a little bit troubling, and made you worry a bit that the team would be ready for the season. And as it turned out, the team was very much not ready for the season. But the fans, any fan that saw anyone questioning their roster decision last offseason, ran out to call everyone insane that was doing so. So that's why I found them a bit insufferable, and made me feel a little less bad when all those people that said the roster wasn't good enough were proven to be right.
I'm opening this up because I was going to say what are the most insufferable fans in MLS, and that's an interesting. Cincinnati is an interesting nomination, and you mentioned Seattle, but now I'm kind of thinking about all of sports, and I'm trying to think of what is the most insufferable fan base that I have come across. Maybe it's just because I'm in Philadelphia, but I find Eagles fans a little annoying. No offense, Jake Catanese. I think Cardinals fans and Yankee fans obviously are up there too. But Atlanta United they have a pretty terrible Twitter presence, and obviously too, winning so early on in their franchise's history, I think can only encourage that actions, as you say. But yeah, very interesting. I think Atlanta fans are a solid 9 on a scale of 1 to 10. So that's where I'm putting them.
I think that's fair.
Sean, do we want to get to our favorite moment of this Revolution season? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, if you have one, I'll let you go first, because that's a tough one.
Well, on a personal note, Sean, and I think this is seeing where the season ended. I think this is a bit fitting, but I just want to let our listeners know that one of the favorite moments of my season was right before and after that Philadelphia game. We were arguing someone who was on our podcast Facebook page because he suggested that the Revolution should shift to a 3-man backline with Edgar Castillo as one of the center backs, and he suggested that as a question, and we answered that we did not think it would work because Edgar Castillo is 5'6" and 160 pounds and cannot play center back, and he was very offended by that and called us many very mean names. So I think my favorite moment of the season is that day where I'm texting you saying, does this guy honestly think Edgar Castillo plays center back? And he obviously does not listen anymore because I believe there are multiple 4-letter words he called us, but he said some very, very mean things. So I think my favorite moment was having our first social media troll who was very upset at our answers. And I know we disagree with our listeners sometimes. I know we defend Scott Caldwell. I know we don't have popular opinions. But sitting there trying to defend the stance that Edgar Castillo cannot play center back was a pretty astonishing moment for me.
That is actually a great shout. I had almost forgotten about that moment. I'm not sure how, but that is a great call. For me, it's tough to say what was the top moment on the field, off the field. Just seeing the Revolution back in the playoffs and back actually playing exciting soccer in September and October, with a chance to actually do something. That's not just a moment, but just having that experience this year and having something to kind of look forward to and see the Revolution actually have a chance to do something this season, would, I guess, be my favorite moment compared to the past few years of just futility and watching and the other thing too is watching the Revolution actually play good soccer a lot of the time under Bruce Arena, because they weren't just losing with Brad Friedel, they were terrible to watch. So this season was just one that actually made me want to watch Revolution games again and give you hope that going forward they might actually do something, because during Brad Friedel's tenure, particularly really starting halfway through last season, the team was just absolutely terrible to watch, as well as consistently losing games by big margins. So I think there's just a lot more to look forward to next year, and the turning point being the replacement of Brad Friedel and Mike Burns by Bruce Arena being the key there.
Yeah, and we've come a long way from losing to Cincinnati at home and losing by 5 goals in Philly and Chicago. I mean, it's a completely different season the way this turned out because early on in the season, I think you and I were quite, I will say, frustrated with this team and quite angry with their performance. And it just didn't make any sense to why they were so bad. So, yeah, going into this offseason, obviously a lot more optimism. I do have some other nominations other than being trolled that I would like to nominate for my favorite moment of the season. I think if we're going moment, I think Bruce Arena's "Does Anyone Know What's Going On Here" will live on forever in my mind.
Oh, that's a good call too.
I will like to nominate the Colorado game that ended at approximately, I believe it was 2:45 in the morning. The 2-1 victory where Matt Turner makes the goal line save at the last minute. That was a great game. That was a really, really crazy game back and forth. I think the U.S. Open Cup game with the Red Bulls, where Teal Bunbury has the brace and kind of comes out of his shell and starts the Summer of Teal, where he had that 6-week span where he was amazing, deserves a little bit more credit. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few other ones. Oh, of course, the Gustavo Bo, Carles Gil volley off of that corner in Gustavo Bo's first game, I think deserves another mention too. That was amazing, and I think was a great way for Gustavo Bo to introduce himself. So there are a few games like that. Teal Bunbury, I believe, had a last-minute goal against Houston, if I remember correctly. That was a great win for the Revolution and was kind of at the beginning of their run to turn the season around. So that goal was pretty significant on the season. So a lot of favorite moments, but I think Bruce Arena in his halftime interview, "Does anyone know what's going on here?" If we're nominating a favorite moment, I think that one has to take the cake.
Beating the Galaxy on the road with Zlatan playing is also always exciting too.
Absolutely.
And speaking of the Galaxy, they just took the lead against Minnesota for what would be the first ever road win of the new playoff format if they hold on another 18 minutes.
Well, hopefully Minnesota pulls that one out. As much as I enjoy Zlatan's antics, I don't want him to advance in the playoffs. So, and I should say Zlatan had a great goal in that game, in the Revs game. That bicycle kick was stunning. That was something else. But that is also another game. That was probably the moment where you're like, well, I think we have something here. And the Revs were turning it around too. And I get Mike Lapper's first interview too as head coach, where everyone decided that we liked him. We went from wow, we just nominated Friedel's top assistant. How can this go any well? To, oh, this guy's awesome.
Hey, he doesn't crap on his players after every game. What a concept! A coach that doesn't call out all of his players and crap on them after every game. Shocking.
Coach that believes in his players. That's amazing.
Doesn't need fans to beat up the players in the parking lot. Oh, that was also you forgot that moment. That would be a top moment.
Oh my goodness. We could do a whole Friedel podcast of our favorite Friedel moments. So this won't get talked about. This is going to get me on a tangent. How funny is it now in hindsight? The press conference where I think they beat Minnesota United. I think it was like 2-1. It wasn't a one-sided affair whatsoever. It was like the first Revs win in like 5 or 6 games. It was something like that. And there were talks. People had said before the season that the Revs weren't motivated or the coaching staff isn't getting the players and blah 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 blah. And so that was kind of like a narrative going on. And Brad Friedel wins one game in like a month and a half, and he goes and he rants at the media. He's like, I know some people here don't think we can motivate our players, and it was right after the thing about how players aren't motivated and how they need fans to wait in the parking lot. And Friedel took this big victory lap on the media for something that he pretty much said. And that had to have been one of Friedel's last wins as head coach. I mean, oh man, I need to look up that press conference, but I remember at the time I was like, this guy sucks. Anyway, sorry, rant over.
Well, it's just I just love the fact now that and Bruce Arena is such a smart guy that he would never admit that this is what he's doing, but at the back of his mind, this is intentional. How often Bruce Arena talks about how good the mentality of the Revolution players are. Because he's down the stretch, he's so many times where he just talked about how great the mentality of the Revolution players is when Brad Friedel was trying to convince everybody that followed the Revolution that his players had a terrible mentality and that they couldn't fix it. And, they're just a whole bunch of losers in their minds. And I don't think the Revolution roster is as good as Bruce Arena made it look, but it is certainly not as terrible as Brad Friedel made it look. And it's just hilarious to me to hear all the times where Bruce Arena talks about the mentality now. And you can't stop but hold back a chuckle when Arena talks about how great the mentality is, when for so long this season it was all about these guys are so, the loser mentality of these players is what's costing the Revolution games.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, they really did just need a different change in mentality, but that mentality would only prove they fired the coach. So, and I don't know. Looking back too, the first two, we could do a full podcast on what the hell was Brad Friedel thinking in the beginning of this season. I mean, he just seemed to rotate players in and out based on who he was mad at that day. I mean, it was oh my goodness. And someone pointed out too, we'll talk about Matt Turner not being nominated for goalkeeper. Actually, let's go straight into this because it's a transition. Matt Turner was not nominated for goalkeeper of the year. The haters like you, Sean, who said that Matt Turner didn't play enough, which, okay, whatever. They end up being the victors in this debate. Matt Turner only in quotations getting 20 starts. Bill Hamid, who probably will win goalkeeper of the year. Manoni out in Minnesota, and then Sean Johnson for some reason for New York City FC are the nominees for goalkeeper of the year. Someone on Twitter pointed out that Brad Friedel once said that Matt Turner was one of the best American goalkeepers, and someone replied with, Brad Friedel, the guy that made him the third keeper at the start of the season. It's insane to me that going back how much Matt Turner was, lauded by, Kevin Hitchcock, who was the goalkeeping coach under Friedel and Arena. Friedel loved Matt Turner. Everyone loved Matt Turner. And then Matt Turner was just buried as the third keeper at the beginning of the season. And I know that probably cost him a spot as a goalkeeper of the year nominee. But what an insane decision in hindsight. Like, what on earth was Brad Friedel thinking?
Well, look, he had a rough preseason, so I get it. But the fact that it took so long to reinstill him as the everyday starter is crazy. With that said, I never know how to evaluate Brad Friedel when it comes to Matt Turner, because Brad Friedel was the coach that gave Matt Turner his first chance in MLS. And then he was also the coach that benched him. So, I think the Revolution owe Brad Friedel some credit for actually giving Matt Turner a chance. But yeah, if the reason that Matt Turner is not goalkeeper of the year is because Brad Friedel didn't give him more minutes. And, I'm perfectly okay with Bill Hamid winning goalkeeper of the year. I think he's a fine choice. And I'm also okay with Manone being a candidate for it. But as you mentioned, Sean Johnson just makes absolutely no sense to me. And Steve Clark, I think, played 4 more games than Matt Turner, and he had, a fantastic season. He would make more sense to me than Sean Johnson. But then if you're going to even rule him out for not enough games, Brad Guzan played every game this season, and his numbers are a bit better than Sean Johnson. I think he's got twice as many shutouts as Sean Johnson, and I know Atlanta fans would be rooting hard for him to win it. So why Sean Johnson over Brad Guzan? And then one or two reporters have thrown out Nick Rimando as kind of a lifetime achievement award. I don't agree with that. It is surprising Nick Rimando never won goalkeeper of the year, but if you actually go back and look at every year where he had a good season, I think it's fair to say there were keepers that were just a little bit better than him that year, and there wasn't really one where he was robbed. And I'm not a big fan of a lifetime achievement award for what is supposed to be a season award, but at the same time, I don't think Sean Johnson had a better season than Nick Rimando. And the one explanation I saw from somebody that voted for Sean Johnson is that New York's system requires him to kind of play with the ball at his feet and distribute out of the back. And yeah, there is some of that, but at the same time, he's made some very notable gaffes this year too. So that one just makes no sense to me. I completely get the logic for Bill Hamid winning it. I think he's, probably deserves it. And I completely get the logic for Manone being in perhaps second place. But as a number 3, there are so many better options than Sean Johnson in my mind.
You could actually make the argument that 2 of the top keepers in MLS between Steve Clark and Matt Turner are not nominees for this award. And I understand why Manone got a nomination. I'm not too – if this was Clark, Manone, and Clark, I have no real complaints here. But Sean Johnson getting nominated is so bizarre and so crazy. And the traditional stats, too, don't really back it up. As you said, if you look at his expected goals stat, I thought maybe he's up there, too. Maybe that's a reason why. I mean, he's around 0. So he had a average performance based on the expected goals stat that Matt Turner and Steve Clark dominated at this season. So I don't understand. We need an explanation on the Sean Johnson nominee. I'm not really sure where that's coming from. Not to say that he's a terrible keeper or anything like that, but I do not understand why he got nominated over Clark and Turner. One other thing,
I think he's an average keeper that has always been overhyped. Bill Hamid I think is great, but I've never seen it with Sean Johnson. There's times where he makes fantastic saves, but the consistently playing at a really high level, I've just never really seen it from Sean Johnson.
Well, and I saw some people tweet out that they voted for Matt Turner. Who's voting for Sean Johnson? Like, no, I didn't see any single person that made their votes public vote for Sean Johnson. It must be.
I saw one. I wish I could remember who it was.
Anyway,
I saw one, but I can't remember who it was. Now I want to go find it.
Also, interesting stat here, Sean, because I told you a couple weeks ago I looked up to see who led the Team of the Week awards, who had the most appearances in the Team of the Week, which, of course, Matt Turner ended the season with 4 appearances in the starting 11 of the Team of the Week, 5 overall with a bench appearance. Guess how many Team of the Week appearances in the starting 11 Bill Hamid had this season?
4?
0.
Wow.
Bill Hamid was on the bench 5 times, including the last 2 weeks of the season, was not in the starting 11 of Team of the Week at all. But he probably will be the goalkeeper of the year, which I'm not mad about. I think he, of those 3, is the most deserving. And I think even if you have Clark and Turner in there, I think Hamid has a very good argument. But never once Team of the Week, according to Audi Index. So
it's surprising to me that a guy that faced 5 penalty kicks this season and only let one of them in didn't. I assume he saved at least one of those. That he didn't have some week where he made a fantastic PK save and got a shutout or something. And given his overall stats and how many shutouts he had, 14, that he never made it once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Matt Turner and Hamid had 5 appearances in the Team of the Week, 18, and Matt Turner had 4 appearances in the starting 11, and all 5 of Hamid's appearances were on the bench. So. Thought that was...
I mean, it helped. It helps Hamid's case that the last 5 games of the season, he didn't give up a goal.
Yes.
It's a good way to end it.
Yes. Also, while we're talking about awards, Carles Gil, newcomer of the year. I think that's well deserved. I don't think you have any disputes with that. I don't really think we need to talk about it. I just think it was really well deserved. This was an amazing signing by the Revs. Arguably the best.
Gustavo Bo finished 5th, which is interesting.
Gustavo Bo finished 5th. I was going to say Carles Gil, arguably the best thing Burns has ever done for the Revolution. You might dispute me on that. Maybe Jermaine Jones, although that I think was more craft than Burns, as we've learned in hindsight. But yes. Yeah, Carles Gil, Gustavo Bo, both finishing in the top 5 of newcomer of the year. Obviously, Gustavo Bo knocked down a little bit because he didn't have as many appearances, so his stats really aren't really there overall. So it would be interesting to see where he would have finished if he had some more appearances.
Stats he had over a full season, he probably would have been newcomer of the year, and Carles Gil might have finished 2nd. So it is, like you said, big move by Mike Burns. I'd probably agree the best move the Revolution Mike Burns made was bringing in Carles Gil, and then Gustavo Bo, fantastic first big signing by Bruce Arena. So those are 2 guys that will be a key part of the Revolution next year, and really the guys the Revolution build around.
Also, before we move on to final thoughts and wrap this up, I know we're going long at this point defending Mike Burns. Please don't be that guy, guys. Just come on. Don't defend Mike Burns. Someone said, this
with all the years he's been here, you can pick out a few good things that he did, but come on.
This is the roster Mike Burns assembled. People need to give him credit. People unfairly. Come on. He brought his roommate in as head coach, and that was a total failure. He has been very lackadaisical. He's been very lazy in terms of international signings. The Revs have fallen behind in terms of international scouting and youth development. He's watched MLS 2 come and go, MLS 3 come and go. He is so far behind the ball in terms of the rest of the league. And the Revs have made more strides from a front office perspective and from a player development perspective and from an acquisition perspective, in my mind, in the last 6 months under Bruce Arena than we had in years in Mike Burns. And Mike Burns had the same roster year after year after year, and the turnover was 3 or 4 players. Don't defend Mike Burns. Please. I'm begging you, don't defend Mike Burns.
And under Mike Burns, it never seemed like the Revolution were going to have a Revolution 2. Talk of that was kind of shot down anytime it came up. And then Bruce Arena comes in, and almost instantly, the Revolution are getting a Revolution 2. So, even if you want to say part of that's craft, not spending enough money, well, Bruce Arena apparently can get Kraft to spend money. Mike Burns finally could get him to spend money this offseason on Carles Gil. Maybe Mike Burns wasn't doing enough to pressure Bruce Arena Bob Kraft to spend money, or to convince Bob Kraft that they needed to spend money. So some of that, I think you can't give him absolve him on that either. But then it's not worth going into now. But what he did do with the money he did have.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for every Carles Gil and Jermaine Jones, we can point to a Michael Mancienne or Christian Nemeth or a Xavier Kouassi. We can go down the list of the big money signings that just did not pan out year after year after year. And it's a very obvious flaw to anyone, I think, paying attention, that scouting and player acquisition was holding this team back. So you can certainly blame the coaching. You can certainly blame the ownership. But the front office really should have done better with the resources they had, even though they were limited compared to the rest of MLS. I think that's a fair assessment. And the fact that Bruce Arena got this team to the playoffs does not justify this Mike Burns' 2019 roster that he assembled, because a lot of it was laziness, and there's still a lot of pieces that are missing that ended up costing the team. So anyway.
Well, and it took the best coach in league history to get that roster to the playoffs and get them into the 7th seed. So, and yes, he was put in a big hole by Brad Friedel, but, you know, I still don't think you look at this roster and, you know, minus Gustavo Bo, they might not even get to the playoffs.
And you know, Bruce Arena was interviewed 2 years ago. You wonder if Mike Burns steered them towards Friedel. I'm under the impression that he did. You wonder if Mike Burns pushed the team to Arena, if they decide to go with Arena instead of Friedel, where the Revs end up now. Because you have to assume maybe Arena doesn't have as much control. You still might have Mike Burns here. You know, in the end, I think it worked out for the best where Arena is in control of everything and is implementing his kind of system and his development path. But man, Mike Burns, please, none of our listeners, please, I beg of you, do not defend Mike Burns. I cannot believe there are people that still defend Mike Burns. But anyway, Sean, we're going a little long today. We're getting into rambling mode, but do you have any final thoughts on the 2019 season you want to throw out?
No, I mean, it's just going to be a fascinating offseason with Bruce Arena, and, you know, we've seen him take over a Galaxy team and completely change the roster in the offseason. And I think we saw him take over this Revolution team, and we're expecting him to kind of completely overhaul the roster in the offseason. But now he's talking about, you know, they signed Butner, and he's talking about maybe 3 or 4 more signings. So I think his opinion of the roster has changed. He said it has, and I think it fairly has. So I'm just very curious to see how much he does change this roster in the offseason, because now I think what we were thinking was going to be a complete overhaul may actually end up just being 3 or 4 players, or maybe Bruce Arena's just been tricking us all, which would also not be surprising given Bruce Arena's MO, and we are going to see a big overhaul. But to, you know, finally have somebody in charge of the roster decisions that has a proven track record and that, you know, is competent in MLS acquisitions, is going to be interesting and fun to watch.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And we mentioned those 5 players, or I guess I listed off 7 players that might be going. You know, that would leave the Revs with about 10 roster spots open. Now, a couple of those are going to be reserved and supplemental roster spots that are filled by the draft, but they're going to have money to work with. They're going to have some roster spots to play with. And it's really exciting to have a guy in charge who wants to go out and make moves, isn't really just there to meet a budget and retain players. So I'm excited to see the first offseason under Bruce Arena. I just want to quickly give a thank you to all the people that joined us on the podcast. Sean, we had very busy summers, and so we relied on our guest hosts a lot. Seth from the Bent Musket, Jake and Matt also from the Bent Musket made appearances on the podcast. Carl Sutherland of the Telegram Gazette came on a few times, and John Siegel made one appearance this year. So we had 5 different guest hosts, and they all did a very great job, and we were super appreciative of them to step in when one of us was unable to record the podcast. It was really nice of them to dedicate their time, and they all do a great job. So hopefully you guys follow them on Twitter and read their work too, because they're all very, very good writers, and as well as the rest of the people on the Revolution beat. I think it was a really solid season, and as I say, everyone on the beat kind of has a strong passion for the Revolution, and yeah, they all do a very, very great job. So I just want to say thanks to our guests and everyone else in the Revolution Media on a great season, and looking forward to 2020. Sean, before we go, I'm done promoting everyone else, do you want to give out your guest handle on where people can find you on Twitter?
Yeah, you can follow me at Sean L. Donahue, and when we're not podcasting, I'll still try to keep up with my thoughts on what's going on in the Revolution world on that, and, you know, try to keep up with the MLS playoffs. I'm still slightly distracted by the ending of this LA Galaxy Minnesota United game that's going on as we're recording, where the Galaxy were up 2-0 and now are 2-1, and Minnesota making a desperate attempt in the last few minutes to come back. But as I mentioned earlier, the Galaxy would be the first team to get an away win in the new format, and would set up a nice MLS match made in heaven of the LAFC versus the LA Galaxy.
No, I want the Galaxy to win now. Need the Galaxy to win now. I think LAFC
it's in the script.
that is a game I could see LAFC dropping. That Galaxy are one of the few teams I could see LAFC losing to, just because that is such.
The Galaxy have their number.
I know, and every time they meet up, it's always fun to watch. So actually, yeah, sorry Minnesota, I'm dumping you to the curb. I hope Galaxy sees this one out. Anyway, you can follow us on Twitter at Revolution Recap, and also like our Revolution Recap page on Facebook. Please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. That puts a bow on us this season. We'll check in time to time. Most likely our next podcast will be between the time the Revolution make their roster decisions that we talked about here today and the expansion draft that's going to be coming up, I believe, in mid-November. So probably another podcast in 3 or 4 weeks. We'll see when our schedule works out best. But we don't have an exact date pinned down right now. But whenever it is, thank you, everyone, for listening. We greatly appreciate you staying with us all season long. And go Revolution.